Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Thursday, the 11th of April. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Jonny McFarlane. How's it going, Jonny?
Good, mate. Good. Yeah, another appearance on the morning briefing with Joshua being on holiday, so looking forward to a good chat about football. Sorry, there's no football to discuss.
Yes, but there is plenty to discuss with regards to yesterday's farcical day up in Dundee. Before we talk all things Rangers, folks, just a quick word for our podcast sponsors, the MPH Boilers.co.uk. Remember, these are the guys to go to if your boiler's knackered. They've got some brilliant Viessmann boilers on offer at this moment in time. You also get a free internet controller. You get flexible finance options, and the first year's service is absolutely free as well. The all-important links are in the description below. Do go and check them out if that is something that is on your mind. Rangers is on many people's minds, Jonny, and of course, as you said, we were looking forward to a game at Dens Park last night. It was postponed for a second time. It passed its first pitch inspection by Don Robertson at 11 a.m. Why that was carried out, I have no idea, because the rain then began to fall, and a second pitch inspection at 3:30. Don Robertson deemed the match to be unplayable due to waterlogged areas of the pitch. It's now sparked statements, one from Rangers. We've had an SPFL statement. We've had a statement from Dundee, which we'll cover as well. Hibs are now furious about the situation. Also, it's just an absolute calamity. What did you make of it all yesterday? It was another comedic day in the world of Scottish football.
Absolutely. First of all, Derek, I would defend the SFA a little bit for the 11 a.m. pitch inspection, because anyone who saw the pictures coming in from the Motherwell game at the weekend would have looked at some of the patches in that pitch and said, after 90 minutes and after rain, which there had been over the course of the 3 or 4 days, it was reasonable to suggest that the game could have been called off very early. Like, if the pitch had been in a really bad state and was unplayable at 11 a.m., it gives people the absolute maximum amount of time in terms of, right, the game's off, so don't travel. Now, I know there wouldn't have been that many, but there still would have been, and there still was, Rangers fans who had left when the game was cancelled at 3:30, 3:45, because, you know, what, a huge club like Rangers, there's going to be people leaving from all over the country. We know people come from Ireland. We know people come from England. So I would defend that. I think that's why. But with the way it happened, Derek, that it passed, then you do look at it and say, well, you know, it didn't actually tell you anything, but the game could have been cancelled at that point. But in terms of Dundee themselves, I think it's hard to be anything but scathing. You know, this is the 5th time that they've had a match postponed. It's the 2nd time with Rangers. They clearly have massive problems with their pitch. They've had an excellent season. Tony Docherty, I think, has done a really, really good job there. And they've been able to invest in some good players that you would think, if that money had been properly channeled into the pitch, they perhaps wouldn't have been able to afford. So I think there's other people around them who are entitled to be coming up with that old hoary chestnut of sporting integrity, which only seems to come up I thought that was a huge thing in Scottish football, that everyone wanted sporting integrity. But apparently it only rears its head every so often. So I think that's something that you can be accusing Dundee of, in terms of the pitch and not investing enough. I don't know how much money they have put into it, but clearly it's not enough because of the situation with the call-offs. It's also staggering that they would have someone come out and blame climate change, given that just across the road at Tannadice, the pitch is a lush, green, bucolic environment, you know, that is perfect for playing football on. So it's not great at all that they would come out and sort of suggest that there's some sort of larger scale issue, because then it would be affecting every club. But the truth is that's not the case, and it's not the case on the same street. So I don't think that was a very wise thing, and it was roundly mocked what the club secretary had to say about that.
Yeah.
Motherwell had this for a long time, Derek. These issues, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? And what they did was they went out and invested they got a really, really good set of staff in to look after their pitch. And now Motherwell, I would say, outside of maybe Hearts, Rangers and Celtic, is the best pitch in the SPFL. Certainly in the top 5 or 6, no doubt about that. It's terrific. And there's no secret to it. It's hard work, it's investment, it's getting the right people in. And that's what Dundee have to do, and have to do ASAP.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, Jonny, that they have had a decent season, but they have spent their money on bringing in quality players as opposed to looking after the maintenance and the upkeep of the pitch. And I can understand why clubs like Motherwell, like Hibs, are quite rightly furious. Hibs have communicated their concerns that Tony Docherty's sides have gained a sporting advantage with the match rescheduled for next week. It'll be a full 4 days after Hibs travel to Motherwell in their top 6 showdown at Fir Park.
That's also a fair point.
What's that?
I'd argue that, you know.
Yeah, it absolutely is. They say that the Hibs playing the rearranged, Dundee playing the rearranged match with Rangers after the final round of pre-split fixtures are completed this weekend undermines the sporting integrity of the league programme, and they've made their feelings clear to the SPFL. So there's a number of ramifications from this. And as Philip Clement quite rightly said in his pre-match press conference, Jonny, a question was put to him, are you happy with the game being played next week? And he said, what if it rains next week, which it is scheduled to do? We're going to be in the exact same position. I don't think Dundee should have any say on where this match is played. I think it should be played at another venue somewhere, just to get the game on. And of course, Rangers are going to be inconvenienced because they'll have to have another trip up north, and it's eating into their training schedule for their preparation against Hearts. Hearts will have a free week to prepare for that huge Scottish Cup semi-final. Rangers won't. It's an absolute disaster.
Yeah, it's not fair. And that's why the SPFL have rightly opened up an investigation into Dundee. And hopefully Dundee will be punished, because this simply can't be allowed to continue. It's a shambles of a situation. It makes the game look absolutely tin pot up here. You see the English pundits are lining up to have a good laugh at us over it. I was speaking to a colleague who was down south and said that many of his pals and people that he knows around him who follow football were asking what the heck was going on up here. I think Michael Beale was on a Sky programme last night saying that he felt the overall standard of groundskeeping in Scottish football is lower than it should be. He talked about quite a number of the away grounds in the SPFL allow their grass to grow too long, and that the general standard in terms of how it's affected by the weather and how that makes it changeable is not good at all. Now, Michael Beale was obviously an unsuccessful Rangers manager, but he spent a long time at the club and saw a lot of examples of it. So I think he's a good source on the quality of the pitches, having been down south and seen the levels down there. Now, I know there's a lot more money in the game, but I think when we're talking about the elite league, we need to have elite standards, and that costs money, and clubs need to be made to have a certain level. I'm not talking about Premier League level, about hybrid pitches, Derek, but I'm talking about a basic level, a basic quality.
There's amateur clubs with better surfaces than that.
Yeah. And that's a major problem. Now, listen, when I was seeing the footage of the pitch, it's clear that the overall pitch isn't actually that bad, Derek. It's 3 or 4 areas. I think it's 3 areas actually. Three areas of the pitch that are particularly bad, where there's serious problems. But rain. This is Scotland. Rain is coming down all the time, and Dundee need to have a situation whereby they can deal with that. And if they can't, if they won't, then the SPFL absolutely have to step up. And for me, the problem is with this, obviously Dundee are at fault, but there's a larger problem with the SPFL now. Rangers have been at the forefront of this. To be fair, Aberdeen have also come in now. and said it's not good enough, the leadership. Now, my point would be on this. Do you have to wait until it's the 5th game for it to be announced that there's action being taken place? Is that proactive front foot leadership? When was the last time Neil Doncaster actually put himself up for an interview?
When the Sky said that they had record viewing numbers for the Old Firm game at the weekend,
that's not an interview, mate. That's just a press release. I mean,
but he was quick off the mark to big up the viewing figures, but he's nowhere to be seen for issues like this. He's paid enough money to front up, and yet where is he?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it. I mean, everyone talks about money in Scottish football. You know, the VAR setup that we have is based on the fact that the clubs didn't want to spend an awful lot of money on it. 6 cameras, but taking the feed from the broadcasters. So if a broadcaster happens to be zoomed in on a player, for example, at one point in a game, and a VAR instant is missed where that angle would have been the best angle, so be it. You don't have that angle. So there's lots of examples where corners have been cut when it comes to money, and yet Neil Doncaster can be paid £400,000 a year. And that's what we know about. We don't know about his bonuses. And have a clause in his contract that means if he leaves, or if he's asked to leave, then more accurately, if he's asked to leave, he's got a 2-year notice period, which means he's going to get the best part of £800,000 to get him out the door. And as people are saying there, Stephen Sistruck saying Doncaster has Scotland bent over a bat. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, the clubs aren't immune from criticism on this. You know, it's not just Doncaster, and you shouldn't really even blame Doncaster. It's the rest of the clubs that refuse to accept that there's a complete leadership vacuum at the heart of the SPFL. That needs to change, and more clubs need to be brought on board, and Rangers need to be doing, alongside Aberdeen, a lot of work in the background to bring more and more of these clubs on board. Now, we saw with the last statement, it's all gone very quiet on that, but the last statement regarding the SPFL independent review, there was a number of other clubs came on board, and I think we need to see a sort of building consensus there that it's time for a change at the SPFL. This is just another example. I'm not saying this incident is on Doncaster per se, but it's just another example where there's just been a complete lack of leadership from the top.
Yeah, it falls at his doorstep, I'm afraid. And how, like you say, Jonny, how we've got to a stage where we've had 5 games. I think it's a quarter. I'm right in thinking a quarter of their home games this season have now been postponed.
It's higher than that.
That is utterly ridiculous. And disciplinary proceedings should have began before now. And I've seen a few comments saying what that should entail. Wilson says, deduct enough points to ensure they're not rewarded with a top 6 place. Maka says, dock them 3 points before they finally play us. Whether it's financial or point-based punishment, I think it has to be something like that that's going to hurt Dundee, because we cannot have this situation rear its ugly head again. But it's the fans, the Rangers fans, do they get compensated, Jonny? Again, another trip when they went up there for the original fixture. Of course, there was many of them milling outside of Dens Park, as you mentioned. Loads of them travel from really far away to follow Rangers. And again, Rangers mentioned this in their statement. They're inconvenienced by this decision yesterday. And it's those, again, that are out of pocket, which is just it's an absolute shambles for me.
I wouldn't dock them points. I don't like docking points unless it's absolutely necessary. And just like I don't like people talking about stripping titles or stripping cups or whatever for whatever infraction. I think like what happens on the football pitch should, wherever possible, remain, because that's where the sporting clash happens. But in terms of the point that you made there, Derek, remind me again. Sorry, remind me what you're saying.
I mean, it should be in the rules already. I know they're saying that they're exploring disciplinary proceedings against Dundee, but this should already be written in the rules, surely, Jonny. But what should What is a suitable punishment for this?
Yeah, well, yeah. So as I say, I think if you're talking about points, I think that's a little bit too far. But it needs to be graduated. It needs to be, if there's further problems, then this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen. But I think it has to be a financial hit, and Dundee should be made to recompense at varying stages. Obviously, we've just got far too far into it to start this. This should have started after. You should get a couple of games where crazy things can happen and you can have games called off. But to get to this stage is ridiculous. What I was going to say, Derek, is the point that you made about the fans. I think that's really important. Sometimes I listen to my fellow journalists talking about these things, talking about games like this, and I think sometimes we miss the point that you just made, which is kind of key, because we're going to games, we're getting money back for our petrol, we're getting into the game for free. You know, we're part of the ecosystem of Scottish football in a professional capacity. But sometimes you have to put yourself into the mindset of the fan and how much this affects them. Because people have taken their afternoon off work in readiness to go to the game, and they've lost money in that regard, or they've lost holiday time in that regard. They've booked travel. You might have booked train tickets up there that you can't get a refund for. You know how difficult that is when you've booked something. So to have a game called off without sufficient notice, and we can argue all day about how much sufficient notice is, but it's absolutely important and imperative that we put fans at the centre of this, and that should be the way the SPFL are thinking. If this sort of thing happens, is there a scheme in which fans can be compensated for their losses? Is there a way to do that? That would be difficult. That would be complex, Derek. But we need to remember that people are the lifeblood of this game. The reason Scottish football is not in a perilous state is because of the fans, because how many people turn up on match day. I mean, Scottish football, I think it's in the top couple of leagues in Europe in terms of the amount of people per head of population in Scotland that come along. I think Luxembourg's maybe slightly ahead, but certainly of the bigger leagues, Scotland is the top one. And that speaks to highly engaged, passionate folk who really, really want to get behind the league and get behind their team and pump money in. So we need to be thinking about that. And that brings us into the whole VAR thing as well, Derek, which I think, I don't want to massively move off the topic, but I think that's where a lot of the upset and unhappiness has come from, is that VAR's kind of also affected the match day experience. So you've got this sort of situation where Scottish football fans, they're not allowed to have a pint at the stadium.
Yep.
They are down south. The VAR is a shadow of what it could be, and certainly what it is in European games. You know, we've watched a lot of Rangers in Europe over the last 3 years.
It's a two-bob version.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's slightly unfair, but it's certainly not the full boona, is it? You compare it to how it works in the Europa League and the Champions League, and you compare it to how it works in the SPFL, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
Some of that is the SPFL have not had it in as long, and they'll get better as it goes on, but still, it's definitely not as effective. And I think overall, fans are right to be disgruntled. And how long can they be continually sort of be seen as second class and not have it affect their attendance levels? Do you know what, Derek? It's like, you know, I'm a passionate football man. I love my football. But now at the age I am, got a young child, more difficult for me to get away on an afternoon and all that. I don't think I would go to games as much now. You know, like you can't, like I'm talking about, you can't go and enjoy a pint. You can't.
Well, the fan experience in Scotland in general, Jonny, needs a lot of. I know Rangers have improved it a great deal with Edmiston House and what have you, but in the main, you're cattled in there, and it's not an enjoyable experience. Like you say, you go down south and it's night and day.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I was down at Sunderland recently, Derek, and the concourses are packed with bars.
Yep.
These people all over there drinking pints and having like, you know, and it's not just kind of like slop either that they're serving up in terms of the food like you get in Scotland, where it's like a burnt pie or a
Yeah.
Normally it's like 4 or 5 different versions of the same pie, isn't it? But
Yeah.
down there, they've got their like fried chicken and curry stalls and loaded nachos and all that sort of stuff. There's actually a proper experience going down to the game. You can go down a couple hours early, have a pint, relax with your pals, have a chat in the concourse. I mean, Scottish football, it's just get them in, get them out, take their money. And that's wrong. And this is just another example of it. And that's something for his 400 grand a year Neil Doncaster should be thinking about. Should be driving some leadership forward on. How do we improve it for fans?
Yeah. He's What positive things has he done? I can't think of any during his time as the head honcho. Thanks to Ross, who says it's 33% of games that have been postponed at Dens Park, which is quite incredible, really. Well, the SPFL do say that disciplinary proceedings are taking place with regards to that. I'm concerned about next week, Jonny. I've got to admit, I think we're going to be in the same situation again. I'm concerned about players' welfare on that pitch as well. It's not good enough, and if it rains again, then we've got a severe problem on our hands. Given the fact, as I mentioned earlier on, Rangers should be preparing for what is a huge Scottish Cup semi-final. Hearts will have that extra day or two to prepare for the game. They'll be fresher, which is not fair whatsoever. Scott's Wilder with the point says, why wasn't there a plan B or C when we all knew a week in advance of possible adverse weather? The manager was asked about this in his pre-match press conference as well, Jonny. I think he wasn't opposed to the idea of moving it to a different venue, and I think Rangers said in their statement yesterday as well that they proposed a number of different options that were rejected by the governing body, which was interesting.
There has to be, for this third fixture, a plan B and a plan C. There absolutely has to be. And there has to be a clear time frame by which that will be settled so that it can be organised. Now, Derek, every time that something like this happens, there's always a complexity to it that unless you're in it, you don't understand. But in these days of QR codes, etc., it's not like it would have been 20 years ago where it's paper tickets.
Yeah.
You could easily send out a new QR code to 10,000 people or 15,000 people and say, right, it's now at McDiarmid Park. Well, it wouldn't be 15,000 at McDiarmid Park, but you get my idea. So I think that needs to be part of it. This game needs to go ahead on that day, and the SPFL have to provide the opportunity for it to do so. Whether that's at McDiarmid or Hampden or Ibrox, although, to be fair, I think that's stretching it a little bit. Wherever it goes, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the game is on, the game happens, fans of both both sides get in and are able to bring that fervour and that passion to the occasion. You need the fans. I don't know which ground would be most suitable, Derek. You look at Dundee; it's not in the central belt, so there's not that many options. Where if it was Motherwell, for example, there's so many options around.
Yeah,
but Motherwell have sorted the pitch, so it wouldn't be them. McDiarmid Park seems like the obvious one. I don't know if there's anything prohibiting that. But it's down the road. It's a better stadium than Dens, that's for sure. And I don't think would the capacity be a problem? 10,000, Derek. I'm not sure how many on average go to a Dundee Rangers game, but it would seem to me like a logical option. And not that their pitch is particularly fantastic, by the way, but the game wouldn't be called off, and that's what we're talking about here as being the main thing.
Yeah. There has to be, like you say, John, there has to be different options. Mark Wilson with the point, he says it's really adverse weather in Scotland. Not really, but Dundee don't look after their pitch, unfortunately, which is why we are in this situation. And this sums it up well. Kenny Weir says, just on supporters heading to games, twice buses from my supporters club in Stevenston have went up and twice had to turn back in Dundee. Dundee should be made to pay the club back for the buses. Most clubs can ill afford it. Absolutely, Dundee should be footing the bill of the SPFL, as we touched on about Neil Doncaster's salary. There is enough money in the game for them to compensate the supporters that are out of pocket. So whether that happens or not, it remains to be seen. I wouldn't hold my breath on it, but yeah, it's the fans that miss out at this one. And of course, with the game being called off last night, folks, the Rangers press conference has been brought forward. So instead of being on Friday, we will hear from Philippe Clement today, this afternoon, just round about 1:30-ish. We'll hear from both Clement and whatever player Rangers put up for the press. Jonny, it will be very interesting to hear what he has to say. I'm thinking to myself, this guy's come over from Belgium. Well, he's come over from Monaco, was his last club, of course. He must be looking around thinking, what on earth have I got myself into here?
You'll just be thinking it's a shambles. And I think he said already there's a few things that wouldn't have happened in an elite league that he's seen. And
yes,
there needs to be that mindset. That's the thing. The thing is, like, Philippe Clement has been at an elite club in Monaco in terms of the finances that are there. Like, they might not be elite in terms of the amount of fans that come, but the training centre at Monaco is next level, and the club itself has got plenty of money. So he's used to a certain level of standard, having been at Bruges, etc., and has got that mindset. Anyone who's spent any time in his company knows that. But a lot of the clubs in Scotland, as you can probably see from some of the stuff that's been going on, they're not elite professional outfits, managed like a big business. It's full of kind of.
You could fair understand it if it was, say, a team in the 7th tier or in the junior leagues, not the top flight of Scottish football. Come on.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm not trying to defend it, but I think what Philippe Clement will do today will be a very, very robust plan for what he's going to say, and I suspect that there will be a few people who are on the end of some sharp barbs. I think he'll be talking about how the perception of Scottish football as a whole is affected by this to outsiders. Be interesting if he mentions, for example, how much interest there's been in Belgium in the weird and wacky world of our game on the back of all this, and people thinking it's a bit of a shambles. But ultimately, I think he'll not want it to become another sideshow, another distraction. So there may also be a sense of make a few comments and then move on, because he won't want his players having any anxiety about this third game and in their preparation. And I suspect that now he'll look to just refocus on the game at the weekend, because they have to win them all, Rangers. It doesn't stop being important. Every game matters. And that game didn't happen, so it's on to the next one.
Yeah.
And we're not at a stage in the season where you can drop the standards even one iota, because if you do, that's when you're giving your opponents the wee chink of light that they're looking for to get ahead, to get into a situation where they've got the opportunity to be ahead. And if you give them that opportunity with the game at Parkhead down the line, then you're really, really taking the pressure off them and put it on yourself. That's the thing for me, Derek. That's one thing. And this is massive. See, at the moment, there's going to be an enormous amount of pressure on Celtic if it remains as is, with both teams winning every game up until that Old Firm encounter. Because Celtic know at that point they have to win. A draw is not good enough. So that, to me, I mean, it's clear cut. But if you're 1-1 with 10 minutes to go, what are Celtic going to do? They're not going to be trying to control the game. They're going to have to pile forward. Well, who have Rangers got? Rabbi Matondo and Abdul Asima. So what's their best game? Counter-attack. So that's absolutely crucial to me. If Rangers have to go to Parkhead and win, that's a very, very difficult ask, I think. No fans there. Celtic are a good side. Celtic are full of experienced campaigners who've been over the course, who know how to win a league. I think they would really fancy that. Where it's more complex is if it's that psychological thing of a draw won't do. And if Rangers can keep parity, then the tension will rise in the stadium, etc., etc. So, to me, it's absolutely imperative that Rangers get to that game at least the 2 points ahead that they would be if they win the game in hand. And then it's going to be really, really interesting at that point.
Well, of course, before Rangers, when Rangers head up to Dingwall, they could be 4 points behind. Celtic do play on the Saturday, so that there is that as well. It's a bit of pressure, but there's pressure in every game, of course, and it will be an intriguing
tussle this time of the season.
What's that?
It's so important at this time of the season, Derek, that kind of putting that onto your opponent.
Yes.
And if something goes wrong, that mentality that Rangers showed to overcome that moment with Tavernier 20 seconds in. Okay, they were rattled for 45 minutes, but they still did it. They overcame the adversity. You need to put that on your opponent. You need to hand it to them and say, okay, you deal with it. And sometimes under the pressure, people can crack.
Yeah.
The problem is over the last, I think, probably 5 years, Rangers have been absolutely awful at turning the screw and putting the pressure up. The pressure's always been on Rangers pretty much. So I think it's time for that to be put on to Celtic and to see how they deal with it. If they don't do that, they won't win the league.
Yep, it's going to be a big game. I still think Celtic are going to drop points elsewhere down the line. Rangers could possibly do that as well, but it's I expect it to go all the way down to the wire. But whether this game gets played or not, it remains to be seen. It has been rescheduled for next Wednesday, so I fear that we'll be in the exact same position. But there we go, Scottish football in a nutshell. Right, we'll wrap up there, folks. As I mentioned, the press conference day today. Chris will be at the Rangers training centre for us, so we'll bring you all the reaction from that and whatever Philip Clement has to say. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting press conference down there. He's also wrote an opinion piece and just bit of an update on where we are with regards to that postponement yesterday, folks. So you can check that out on the Rangers Review website. So I'd urge you to do so. We will be back. For those of you that are YouTube members, I will be back with Chris a little bit later on this afternoon. So we hope you can join us for that. For everyone else, we'll speak to you tomorrow. Bye for now.